Efendim bu pandemi sürecinden önce yani bu toplantılar online değil de sahada olurken Innovera'nın Çırağan da gerçekleştirdiği Shield'de çok enteresan karizmatik bir abi vardı. Eteği, saçı sakalı, duruşu efendim çok canti, yapılı böyle pehlivan mizaçlı bir abi. Ha, bir de öğrendik ki o abi aslında bir zamanların namlı bir hacker'ıymıştı. Sonra o karanlık dünyadan aydınlığa geçmiş ayrı ama acayip karizma bir abi. Yani karizmadan benim göz kesinlikle bir 0.75 daha bir şey kaptı yani. Astimat kaptı söyleyeyim size. Işıltılı bir abiydi. İşte o abi bizi sevdi. Biz o abiyi sevdik. O abi şimdi yine bizimle birlikte. Ama bu sefer çok değişik bir mevzusu var. Güvenli gelecek için diyor tarihten ders almak lazım. Evet, tarihten, savaşlardan, çatışmalardan, tarihin bizzat kendisinden. Ya nasıl olur demeyin, Chris abimizi dinleyin. Efendim Chris Roberts geliyor. Tarihten derslerle güvenli geleceğe nasıl ilerleyeceğimizi çok ilginç bir sunumla anlatıyor. Keyifle dinleyeceğiniz bir şey, hiç merak etmeyin.
Hey, Chris, welcome, my friend. How are you? It is great to see you once again.
Thank you. Fantastic to be here. Well, be here and be here remotely. At least I'm in digital. And I've got Turkish colors on the backdrop as well. So we'll have some fun with this one.
That's perfect, man. You are one of us. It's been a while since you have been in Istanbul, but then we have had the chance to come together thanks to V-Shield on virtual stage, but better than nothing, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's fantastic to be able to hang out again, at least have nice conversations with everybody. But yeah, I miss not being out there. I so miss not being able to walk around and see and go talk to everybody.
Exactly, my friend. I know you have a lot to tell us, and we will again learn a lot from your provocative presentations, my friends. So yeah, hit it, man. I'm just leaving the virtual stage to you.
Awesome. Thank you very, very much. All right. So let's see if we can get this running. With the powers of modern technology, let's have a little bit of fun on this. We'll put that open. We'll put that on. We'll hit full screen, and hopefully everybody gets to see the welcome screen. We're going to have a little bit of fun with this one. I'm actually looking forward to this. I think what inspired this was when I was over in Istanbul and just Turkey in general over the last couple of years. Just the amount of history and the amazing, amazing melting pot of the area. I started thinking about history, and I started thinking about what do we do and what can we learn from history, and what have we forgotten about history. So on with the slides. We're going to have a little fun for about 20 minutes worth of slides, and then hopefully have a fantastic conversation. So again, welcome to V-Shield 2020. On with the slides. We're actually going to talk, as it says, about history. And for those of you that are interested, the castles that we see in here are all from Scotland. So a little bit of fun with this one. So a quick agenda. There'll be the intro slide to say hi. What are we doing and why are we talking about this? A little bit of history. We're going to go from Jericho via Hal, for those of you that remember the Space Odyssey 2001, via Anicock, which was one of the Monty Python ones. We're going to have a talk about what do we learn, or what should we have learned from history, and then a wrap up with a quick ode. And we're going to tie this together with this whole DevSecOps work that we're doing and why it's important and how it's important and various other things from there. So without further ado, again, the big hairy thing that's in front of you is Chris Roberts, obviously a researcher. I am a father to both two-legged and four-legged, and one of my four-legged ones is over there laying on the sofa looking at me, probably wanting snacks fairly soon. I'm obviously a geek and I'm a hacker. And for those of you who want to get hold of me, you can hit me on SideDragon1 at both Twitter and LinkedIn, or hit me up at Hillbilly Hit Squad. So let's take a step back. Why are we actually doing this? And the logic for doing this is because I love this sentence from Arthur C. Clarke, which is when we say something is possible, the chances are it is actually possible. But from our perspective, when we say something is impossible or it's not capable of doing it or anything, we're probably wrong. And this comes back to a lot of our how we approach information security, how we approach technology, and how we have actually looked at the evolution of these systems. And again, back to the DevSecOps stuff, how we've not done a good job of embracing some of the lessons in history. So if we break history down, and we're going to have a look at the reasons why, so we're going to look at some of the insights as to why we chose the period. We're going to have a look at basically some of the key focuses from that area. We're going to look into how does it tie into the philosophy, and then anything else on there as well. From the who we are, now this is us. This is the security people, the development people, the operations. This is IT. And as IT people, we really are members of the community. We're a tribe and we're a collaboration, but we don't really belong. We've kind of clumped together. We don't belong to any of these great civilizations that are out there. I'd argue that a couple of us are uncultured and brutish, especially the big hairy ones. And we're troglodytes and ruffians at times, unfortunately. So really that is us. An InfoSec red team and the security people in general are really the barbarians of our little pieces on this one. Now, for those of you that know your history of the universe and life and everything else in it, we did a little bit of history on this one. We went backwards to about 13.5, 14 billion years ago when everything blew up and all hell broke loose. We fast forwarded through microbes and dinosaurs and all sorts of other interesting stuff, and how they were around and how they weren't around. Then we took a look at the cradle of life. So, what is amazing to me with philosophy and how we as humans have both evolved and not evolved, and how we don't seem to be able to come together effectively across all sorts of interesting areas and regions and, DevSecOps, is that we all came from the same bloody place. Yet we seem to have forgotten a lot of that one. For those of you that hold a slightly different scientific belief or enjoy a little bit of science fiction, there's obviously the theories. We've only been around for a few thousand years. We obviously have the conversations with actual artificial intelligence and quantum mechanics that says that everything we see actually isn't reality. We have without form, without void. We have some people that have said that at 9:15 in October the 1st, about 6,000 years ago, the Earth came into being. So we're in a problem with a Jericho wall and a few things, and all sorts of other fun stuff on this one. But we are going to go back about 12,000 years or so, give or take a bit. We're going to look at Jericho first. And we're going to look at Jericho, obviously, because if we look at it, it's about now 12,000 years ago. And it was the birthplace of modern defense. No two ways about it, no arguments on this one. It's where we first started seeing walls as a system of defense and population be controlled. And let's face it, we still use walls today to try to define our territory, to try to define our barriers, especially in the digital world. And as we very well know, the walls just don't work. No two ways about it. And unfortunately, we still haven't learned those lessons. From a security and a safety standpoint, we try erecting fences around our systems, and we wonder why they keep getting breached. So it's definitely a lesson from Jericho that we seem to really have forgotten. And it's one of those as we move forward in time. And again, we talk about how we collaborate and cooperate with operations and development teams, that we need to remember you can't put everything into a neat little box. It just doesn't work. Now we look at the Assyrians, an amazing, amazing, amazing race. One of the very first written languages that we can actually take a step back of. So for them, for good or for bad, we have to look at the documentation that we do. We also have to look at what else they brought to us. They didn't just bring the concepts of security or the concepts of war with them. They brought all of the rest of the richness of society with them. They brought the versatility with them. So as we look at how we approach security and safety, we should open our minds to other possibilities. We should also take a look and go, what life lessons can I bring with me when I talk to development teams, when I talk to safety teams, when I talk to operations? I can't just come in with a security mindset. And it's how we deal with business. It's the same concept when we deal with business. We keep going in just wanting to bring a security conversation. We forget about businesses, business risk, and manufacturing. We forget about our documentation and our policies and our procedures, and we keep charging down a technology route. And from the Assyrian standpoint, they were able to be very, very diverse. Unfortunately, a lot of the culture has gotten lost and diluted. And it's amazing if we actually took a step back and look at basically the several thousand years they were around and what they gave to us, and really some of those lessons we need to learn from it. So we'll switch continents for a little bit and we'll go talk to our dynasties. This is an amazing one, the Shang dynasty or the Yin dynasty, depends on where you're going. The amazing capabilities that they had for the written language and tactics. And as it says, for government. So we have hierarchical structures. We have tactics that we learn from them. We learned tactics 1,000 years before everybody quotes Sun Tzu in all of our security things. These folks were doing it 1,000 years before Sun Tzu was even around. So these are people who learned and understood tactical situational awareness. And again, we look at us, we look at how we should be learning, not just from our adversaries and from the attackers that are trying to come in to understand how we better protect, or unfortunately can't protect, but we need to look at how they involve governance. And so we're looking at policies and controls. We're looking at procedures. We're looking at how to communicate effectively. Hierarchical structures have been around in business for, several thousand years. Yet as security people, we don't seem to understand how to effectively deal with them. We understand how do we deal with the technical people, but we don't understand how to deal with users effectively, let alone how to make managers succeed, let alone when we go talk to the board level and the senior level folks. We don't have a good way of understanding both written and also spoken language when we're dealing with them. So some lessons to learn from there. And obviously, beware of bureaucrats bearing haikus. I had to put that one in there because that was a fun one. So now we fast forward to the Roman Empire, the end of the ancient era, basically, when we relied upon people and teams and systems that weren't invested in our success. So again, all around us, who is helping us, who's supporting us, and how do we support them? And we look at DevSecOps. The only way that we win is if we work together. The only way that we can actually maintain a strong empire is if we work with development and operations and security. We work with the business, not against them. And one of those biggest lessons that unfortunately we still haven't learned, which is why our empires keep falling down, unfortunately. I had to have a little bit of fun with this. For those of you that are Monty Python people, we have the holy hand grenade. The insanity in the conflict, the inability to separate fact from fiction. One of the biggest issues that we have in our security. This is why I love hanging out with the crews from V-Shield, and I love hanging out with the Innovera crews, because they have a really nice job of actually stripping away the BS that so much of our industry puts in. They'll come and they'll say, hey, this is reality. We're not good at doing that in our own industry, unfortunately. We tend to overpromise and underdeliver. So we have to do a better job on this. And of course, obviously, if in doubt, consult Brother Maynard. So now let's go to the British Empire, the civilized, semi-civilized people. So we had it for about 400 years or so. We took over about a quarter of the world's landmass. It was absolutely amazing. And what we did is we did reuse. So from a tactic, it was quite simple. We'd sail up, we'd plant a flag, and we go, I say, I've got a flag. We should own this part of the territory in all its variances. But because our tactics were similar, and because our adversaries, the defenders, weren't able to communicate effectively between each other, those same tactics ruled for 400 years or more. So for me, this is one of those things that we need to take away, which is how do we become more effective at our defenses? How do we share more information? How, as defenders, do we know when something's going on, and do we collaborate much more effectively on this one? To North America, and very similar things, the 1700s. I'm based in the USA these days, but obviously my language is not from that neck of the woods. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. If we look at American history and how pretty much everybody banded up against the empire and the colonies of England to get us out of this country, it was really interesting. And a lot of the reason for doing it was because of the laws and the inflexible policies. So as we look to work with corporations and organizations, how do we make sure that we are more effective at implementing those policies, procedures, and controls? How do we as security work more effectively with development and operations and the business as a whole to make sure that what we are putting in place will work? Let's look at today. We unfortunately have chased technology, and we have to change that. We have to look at people. We have to look at process. We have to look at how the human is more effective. We also have to look and take lessons from history. Aristotle, The more we know, the more we realize we don't know. We, the individual, can't fix all of this. We collaborate together, again, dev, sec, ops, business, compliance, legal, and everybody around us. We collaborate more effectively, we're going to succeed. And as that last bullet point says, technology is advancing faster. There's a very simple way of looking at this. If you look at all of the data that has been created on this planet to this present day, 90% of that data has been created in the last 2 years. That's it, last 2 years. Not last 10, not last 100, last 2 years we've created 90% of the data on this planet. That's why we can't keep up. That's why we're having so many challenges. So let's fast forward. Let's throw the crystal ball out. And obviously we can't do any presentation without putting HAL 9000 from Space Odyssey in there. We look at the technology that we're projecting for the future. And if we look at the technology we're projecting, we've got all sorts of stuff with nanotech and biotech and the brain, all sorts of interesting stuff to do with computational mathematics, with quantum mechanics, all sorts of amazing stuff. Yet we still can't get through password 123456 as the easiest way in. We just broke into a place yesterday with the user ID, admin, password, root. We shouldn't be able to do that. How can we help those organizations become more effective? So some conclusions, some things to wrap up this brief but hopefully fun jaunt through history. Everything eventually falls and fails. How do we plan accordingly? We don't need to leave this until it fails. What we need to do is have the incident response plan in place. We need to do the training. We need to do the tabletop exercises. We need to assume that an adversary is inside. And if we assume that, what do we do about it and how do we know about it? Again, we have to team up and be more effective with people. And as it says, I have to hammer this point home. You won't keep people out. Walls don't work. So plan accordingly for this, please. The other one, I mean, basically, let's be perfectly honest. Effective communication is key. This was basically the famous messenger. This was where we took out the whole concept of a marathon of somebody potentially, but actually we think at this point in time that he ran even further. I'm not even going to try and enunciate his name, but basically he was the runner that brought the news of the wars and of the results. So it's all these interesting things that we look at. Communication is key on this one. And quite honestly, it's going to take all of us. There's no two ways about it. We cannot argue this point. It's going to take all of us to actually do this. So, as it says, I will end this brief run through time. It has been amazing to just hang out and have everything else. I had to leave the Valhalla prayer on there just for the heck of it. And I hope everybody has enjoyed the brief trip through time. And I hope, we'll have a quick conversation after this one, but I hope that you understand we've looked very quickly through 12,000 years of history. And there's some important messages that we need to take away from this. And we should learn and understand and hopefully not make those same mistakes in the digital world that we're building around us. So with that, I'm going to stop the share and we're going to have a nice conversation.
Friends, that was great. Man, even if you go 100,000 years, most probably we are going to learn that we will repeat the mistakes and history will occur. We don't like learning from our mistakes, right?
Oh, we don't. I mean, really, we've had 12,000 documented years to figure this out, yet we still do it. When I first started this project, and I did it for another reason a while ago, and this always fascinated me. And I'm like, okay, this is going to be interesting. I have a spreadsheet, and I'm not kidding. It fills this 49-inch screen. I have a spreadsheet that talks about like each bit of history and where we should have learned some lessons, but we haven't. And the problem we have now is we're moving so much faster. There's so much more information just coming at us that we can't process it all. So we don't even really know what we should know or what lessons we need to pull from this. And so, yeah, we got some challenges.
Exactly, man. I'm not going to go that far. Just around 100 years, we're building software, right? I'm going to make the problem more specific now, my friend, for our DevSec and developer friends, AppSec and developer friends. Why can't we build secure software, man?
Oh man, that is the $1 million question, isn't it? I mean, I think it's, we do our best. A perfect example. So one of my cars that I have upstairs in the garage, it has about 100 million lines of code just to control the screens and everything else. It's crazy. It's amazing. It's a ton of fun. But that in that 100 million lines of code, there's problems and errors. They might not have been found with all the automated testing, and they might not immediately make that car veer left or veer right and go off the edge of the road, but they're there. And as humans, we're infallible. I mean, we make mistakes as humans. So our process of designing is going to have flaws in it. Our process of coding software will have flaws in it. Our testing will have flaws. And the only time we realize when those flaws are actually present is when somebody does something that they shouldn't do. Perfect example, I always remember years and years ago when we used to design software, one of the QA testers, famous thing that happened years over the time, would come up and just mash the entire keyboard and see what happened. And if it failed gracefully, it was okay. But if it just went, then we knew that there was a problem with it. And so in security, we haven't learned that lesson. Development teams have learned it. Security hasn't really learned it. And so again, we're not communicating and we're not effective. And unfortunately, we only tend to get involved towards the very end. We're not in those early planning meetings. We used to be, but unfortunately, as security people, we've alienated ourselves. We kept blaming everybody rather than taking that step back and going, how can we help? We pass the blame off. And that's been part of the problem.
Coming to the communication piece, man, I mean, this is the first time, I held so many shields, so many conferences in security. And for the first time, we are not talking about the enemy out there. We are talking about how we are going to communicate, how we are going to love each other and build a great team as the developers, ops teams, and the security teams. Because when we cannot solve this problem, then we cannot fight against the hackers together, and we always lose. But why is it so hard to engage with developers and security people?
I think it's a couple of reasons. Part of it, I think, is the language that security uses. So, I mean, if you look at it, one of our most famous tools is called Kali. This is named after a Hindu goddess of death and destruction. So I come to you and I'm like, hey, I'm going to penetrate you. And you're like, the hell are you going to do? And I'm going to use Kali to penetrate and break into you. I'm on the offensive. I'm attacking you. So as a human, your first instinct and results is to step back. Your first instinct is, I hate you. Why are you trying to expose my flaws and my problems? Why are you attacking me? Why are you going to go in and abuse me? So our language is wrong. If I came to you and I said, hey, can we sit down and have a conversation? I love what you've built. I think it's absolutely amazing. But can we have a conversation about how I view it as the attacker? Can we sit down and have a conversation? Can we role play? Can we literally play Dungeons and Dragons and have a conversation? And by the way, I'll bring the coffee and I'll bring the pastries. You're going to be like, oh, hell yeah, let's go do this now. And so it's a much more collaborative conversation as opposed to me coming up to you going, I'm going to beat you up and I'm going to attack you. No, go away. And by the way, not only am I going to beat you up and attack you, I've publicly shamed you for years. For years, I've stood up on stage and said, you're terrible. You can't code. Your code's crap. I can break into it all the time. It's awful. By the way, here's the 10 flaws I found in it last week. And I do all that without working with you. And I expect you to be nice to me now? Not going to happen. We, the security people, have got to eat the humble pie. We've got to come up and literally go cup in hand and go, I'm sorry. I apologize. How can I make it better?
I was reading a research of ESG a couple of days ago. It was saying 86% of the companies are pushing vulnerable code consciously, and it tells me 14% is lying, man. So everybody's doing that, right?
True.
So
Yeah.
what is this? Why are we still pushing vulnerable code consciously? Is this a business decision to
I
be
think it's
fast?
yeah, I think some of it's conscious and some of it's just people don't know. So I mean, there's some research that's been done out there by like Sonatype, Black Duck, and a bunch of other folks. I think you've got a couple of them sponsoring as well, where they have taken it upon themselves to look at all the code bases that we deploy. Because I think, again, I don't know if everybody understands that code these days is like a jigsaw puzzle. I maybe do some core work here, but I pull in code from so many, just all sorts of, so I'm pulling in everybody else's code and baselines and open source, and I'm building this jigsaw that becomes the program that I develop to you. So my code is as probably good as I think it can be, but then I'm pulling all of these bits of code in, and they're not always tested, or they're not always up to date, or the systems aren't always maintained, or, and all of a sudden what I thought was secure and safe isn't, because so many of my third parties, so many of my dependencies that I trusted or that should have maybe done something haven't done their part to it. So I think that's the big part. And again, even if I make my code safe today, tomorrow, some hairy, pain in the ass adversary sitting in his basement in the middle of somewhere goes, hey, let me just try this. And now the code's not safe.
Let's hope that those hairy guys are one of the good ones like yourself, man.
I try to be sometimes. I try to be. I mean, we're still messing with ships. I mean, the fun stuff that we did when we were over there a couple of years ago with shipping, we're still doing crazy things with ships. We're going back to hacking tractors again. We had fun with crops. So we're actually, we put John Deere and we put Cargill on notice that we're going back after hacking crops and hacking tractors again. So we had all this toilet paper pandemic at the beginning of this year. If next year that we don't get any wheat or any soybean or any corn, then you can probably come blame me for that one.
Sure, I will. So if this is a business decision, you know what I mean, then what is secure enough, man? I mean, how much secure is secure enough for us?
I think it's a risk. It's a great point because it's like a business risk. And again, that business risk has to be done with the team. So you have to have the engineering team, the manufacturing, the security, and the operations teams. And I think we come and we explain what our risk is. If you're building a car, I need to make sure that that vehicle, doesn't veer left or doesn't veer right, without me knowing about it. If I'm building an airplane system, secure enough was unfortunately defined 20 years ago when they first started designing the darn thing, not today. So we've had 20 years of evolution, and now arguably it's not secure enough. So that secure enough baseline that we have today is going to change. So secure enough to me is like, how do we protect the human? How do we understand, maybe from a financial risk, a business risk, and a human risk, what's acceptable to the company? When we've understood what that acceptable company risk is, then how do you keep measuring it? Because, the hairy person decides to break into it tomorrow, that risk goes up. So how do we know? What do we do with it? And then how do we bring that risk down as that software evolves? That, I think, is the crucial part. And again, a lot of it's a business discussion. It's walking in and going, hey, what do we care about as a business? What does the CEO of the company or the board of directors care about after we've educated them? And I think that's the big part. We have to educate them again in a way that they understand. That's our job as well.
What is next? What is the evolution of secure coding? What is going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years in application security and development, man?
Well, I mean, I think there's some amazing tools that are being put in place, but what I'm actually interested to see, there's a whole set of conversations around, augmented intelligence, artificial machine learning, and everything else. What I would love to see, and one of the companies I'm actually involved in, we do a lot of work with understanding how AI systems should work versus what the manufacturer says that they do. And what I want to see is I want to see a lot more like the automated testing. So a much more intelligent testing system. We don't have a really good way to do good prototyping. So could I build a very, very narrow augmented intelligence system that could prototype more effectively. So literally I build a system that knows how to mash a keyboard at any point in time, that can think about other scenarios that I maybe not think about. And so that's what I'm really interested to see, is how can we apply a well-defined, we're not talking about some of the crazy stuff that's out there now, how can we actually apply a very well-defined, machine or augmented intelligence system to do a much better job of testing, do a much more effective job at testing beyond what we're capable of doing? Because again, technology is running away from us. We can barely keep up as it is. So whatever we do has to be faster and smarter than what we're doing today. So it can't be a human thing. It's got to be something that actually learns itself. And so that you tie it into an adversarial system, and you tie it into something where it learns those tactics, it understands where the future of those tactics are going, and then can relay and use those as it's testing your platform. That's what I'm really interested in seeing.
So with that, what do you think? As my last question, the elections are coming, my friends. Are you ready this time? Or the bad hairy guys are just, saying, hey man, this one is also coming. What is going to happen?
Oh my goodness. How do I keep this without swearing too much? I gave a lecture. I've actually given a couple leading up to the elections. So did a bunch of research, and there's some amazing, so DEF CON has an amazing voter village, and they've had it for a couple of years, and it's just fantastic. And so a number of us have done some research, and let's just put it this way. We don't need anybody outside the country to influence it. We can screw it up beautifully on our own, because the three companies...
No need it.
We don't need it. No, we don't need the Russians, the Chinese, the Europeans screwing it up. We have done an amazing job of screwing up our own election system. We protect democracy with passwords such as 1111, Everest, password, admin. We did a bunch of research. The code that our voting democracy system runs on is written in like a dozen different languages. It's all over the place. It failed every single test that was thrown at it earlier this year, and yet they're still using it all over the place.
Yes.
Yeah.
They say democracy has to be simple and effective, but most probably they didn't mean this, right?
Yeah.
Not the one password.
I mean, it's like one person, one vote, and I'm sitting there with the passwords. I have all the votes. It's easy that way. Yeah,
man, I would love to vote you. I'm with you, my friend. It is always great to talk to you,
too,
Chris.
sir.
I wish we have more time, but it is always great. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for all your advices, all the questions you answered. Thank you.
Oh, this was fantastic. You're awesome. Thank you so much for having me again. And hopefully when we get through this craziness, we'll catch up again over in your wonderful, wonderful city and country.
I'm looking forward to that, my friend. Take care. Thank you very much.